My wife lied about inheriting $200, $0 from her grandmother to fund her affair with our neighbor, then secretly sold half our house to cover her debts. Now she's trying to claim everything in a bitter legal battle over money and property. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, living through a nightmare I never saw coming. It all started with a gut feeling. Something just didn't sit right anymore. My wife, Emily, had always been a bit of a bitch when it came to money and control, but lately she'd been acting even more secretive. She'd hide her phone, get defensive when I asked about her day, and there was this strange, nervous energy that seemed to hang in the air. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 7, and I thought I knew her inside out. But something was off. The first real sign came when I noticed her phone kept ringing late at night. I'd hear her whispering, and she'd always say she was talking to her sister or a friend. But one night, I decided to sneak a quick glance at her messages. I wasn't snooping out of jealousy, more like instinct. I figured I'd just see if there was anything suspicious, and I wasn't prepared for what I saw. There were texts from a guy named Jake, an obvious code for some kind of affair. The messages were flirty, suggestive, and downright disgusting at times. She was talking about meeting him, about how excited she was, and even about how she hated lying but she couldn't help herself. That was just the tip of the iceberg. I found receipts for hotel bookings under her name, texts about secret meetings, and even pictures of her in bed with him. I felt my stomach drop out. My wife, the woman I trusted with everything, was cheating on me with our neighbor David. How long had this been going on? I couldn't believe it. The woman who'd always acted like she was so perfect, so above reproach, was lying through her teeth. I was furious, hurt, and honestly a little numb. I never thought I'd be that guy whose wife cheated, and then I found out she lied about something even worse. She claimed she inherited $200, $0 from her grandmother to fund her affair. That was a lie, too. She told me her grandmother had left her the money, and she was planning to invest it, maybe buy a new house or start a business. I remember her boastful tone when she talked about how she'd be set for life. But then I started digging more into her stories. Turns out she never inherited a dime. Instead, she secretly sold half our house without telling me to cover her debts, which she'd hidden from me for months. She'd been secretly borrowing money, racking up credit card bills, and then she lied about the inheritance to justify her reckless spending. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this was a web of lies she'd spun for her own benefit. I confronted her that night. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her I knew everything about the affair, the lies, the money. Her face twisted into this bitchy sneer. She looked me straight in the eyes and said I was overreacting, that I didn't understand the pressure she was under, that I was just paranoid. She called me jealous and possessive, and then she started throwing insults, said I was boring, that I didn't satisfy her anymore, that I was too naive to see what was really going on. But I wasn't having it. I showed her the messages, the receipts, the photos. Her face drained of color, but she still insisted she loved me and that everything was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. That moment hit me hard. I felt a mixture of rage, betrayal, and heartbreak. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she betray me like this, not just emotionally but financially? I'd worked my ass off for years, building our life, and she was out there screwing around, lying about inheritance money she never had, selling our house behind my back to cover her debts. The worst part, she didn't even seem to care about the damage she'd done. She just kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting, that she still loved me. That's when I realized I couldn't trust her anymore. Not just as a wife, but as a person. The betrayal ran too deep. I sat there, stunned, trying to process everything. My mind was racing. What do I do now? How do I pick up the pieces of a life that's been shattered? I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I wanted to scream, to break something, but all I could do was sit there and think about how her lies had destroyed everything I thought we had. I kept asking myself how I missed all this, how I didn't see the signs, how I was so blind to her manipulations. I felt stupid, used, and utterly betrayed. And that's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let her get away with it all. I had to fight back, not just emotionally, but in a way she wouldn't see coming. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when someone's been this manipulative, revenge isn't just justified, it's necessary. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying her words, her sneers, the lies she told to cover her tracks. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I knew I had to gather evidence, proof of her infidelity, her financial deception, everything she'd hidden from me. If I was going to do this right, I needed to be methodical. I started digging into her phone, her emails, bank accounts, anything I could get my hands on. I wasn't just angry, I was determined to expose her lies once and for all. The first thing I did was check her banking app. Sure enough, there were transactions I'd never seen before, large cash withdrawals, transfers to an account I didn't recognize. When I traced them, they led to a private account she kept hidden from me. There were also payments for a luxury hotel downtown, charges for dinners, and bizarrely, payments to a company that did home renovations. That's when it hit me. She'd been planning something. I remembered her talking about wanting a bigger house, and now I knew she'd already sold half of ours to cover her debts. The sale was done in secret, without my knowledge or approval. I also found an email thread where she was negotiating with a real estate agent about selling our house. She'd been very careful about hiding it, deleting messages, but I managed to recover some of the correspondence. She was trying to get top dollar, claiming she needed the money to start fresh and pay off her debts. She even told the agent she was planning to buy a new place in another city. I was stunned. She lied to me about everything, her inheritance, her spending, the house. Meanwhile, her affair with David was still ongoing, I was sure of it. I'd seen enough to know she was still meeting him, still sneaking around. I found texts from her late at night talking about how hot the sex was with David, how she hated hiding it but couldn't stop. She'd even sent him pictures of herself in bed looking completely unashamed. It was sickening. She was living a double life, one with me, one with him, and she was convinced she could keep it all hidden forever. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I had to confront her again, but this time with all the proof. I waited till she got home from work, feeling a mixture of anger and heartbreak. When she walked in, I was already sitting on the couch with my phone in hand, showing her the evidence. Her face twisted into a look of pure disdain. She spat out, "You're overreacting, James. You're just jealous. I don't know what you're trying to prove." I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "No, Emily, I've seen everything. The affair, the money, the house, everything you lied about. How long has this been going on? How long have you been screwing around with David?" She scoffed and crossed her arms. "You're just paranoid. You think I'd cheat on you. After all we've been through, you're making a big deal out of nothing. It's just sex, James. We're adults, right?" That's when I lost it. I told her how her lies had ruined everything, how she'd betrayed me emotionally, financially, and morally. I told her I was done being played for a fool. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, but also a strange clarity. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I needed to take control of the situation. Over the next few days, I started planning my next move. I contacted a lawyer, gathered all the evidence I had collected, and began to formulate a strategy. I wanted her to see that I wasn't the naive fool she'd taken for granted, that I knew about her debts, her lies, her affair, and her manipulations. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she'd tried to steal or hide. I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine, our home, our money, and my dignity. The most shocking part was how calm I felt after I made the decision. The initial rage and heartbreak had turned into cold resolve. I knew she'd try to spin this in her favor, paint herself as the victim, but I was ready for that. I had the evidence, and I was ready to expose her for who she really was. She thought she could keep living her double life, lying, cheating, and stealing. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without a fight. Once I had everything lined up, legal advice, proof of her lies, bank statements, the emails, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had some control, and dread because I knew what was coming next. Emily wasn't the type to go down without a fight. She was manipulative, bitchy, and used to getting her way. I knew she'd try to spin it all, make me look like the bad guy, and maybe even try to turn the kids against me. But I also knew I couldn't let her keep pulling the strings. The first move I made was to file for an official separation. I wanted her to see I was serious, that I wasn't just going to roll over and let her walk away with everything. I also served her with a detailed list of what I knew: her affair, her secret sale of the house, her hidden debts. I wanted her to understand that her lies had consequences. It was a cold, calculated move, but I had no choice. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when I knew the truth. She went ballistic when she got the papers. Her face turned bright red and she started screaming about how I was ruining everything, how I was being unfair, how I was just jealous and controlling. She called me paranoid, possessive, and worse. She accused me of trying to destroy her, all because I uncovered her secrets. But I just sat there calm, watching her tantrum. I knew her game. She was trying to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty so I'd back off. But I was done falling for her bullshit. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. She threw everything she had at me, crying, shouting, accusing, pleading, trying to make me look like the villain. She even tried to gaslight me, saying I was crazy for thinking she'd do something so terrible. Meanwhile, I focused on gathering more evidence, talking to my lawyer, and preparing for the inevitable legal battle over the house and money. I knew she would fight me tooth and nail, probably even try to claim I was the one cheating or that I was unstable. But I had her texts, her emails, her bank statements, everything. I was ready. One day she brought her sister over, crying and begging me to drop the case, saying she'd change, that she'd fix everything. I looked her dead in the eyes and told her that I wasn't interested in her empty promises anymore. I told her I'd been patient, but I'd had enough of her lies, her manipulations, her cheating. I said I wanted a clean break, and I was going to fight for what I deserved. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to be a pushover anymore. If she thought she could lie her way out of this, she was dead wrong. The legal process dragged on for months. During that time, I saw her try every trick in the book, trying to sway the judge, making false accusations, even claiming I'd been abusive. But I had enough proof to counter her lies. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation. I kept my cool, stayed focused, and let the evidence do the talking. The hardest part was watching her try to paint herself as the victim, even as I knew the truth. She was bitter, angry, and desperate. She'd lost control and she hated it. Meanwhile, I started to feel the full weight of everything she'd done. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, legal, personal. She'd lied about inheriting money, then secretly sold our house, racking up debts she didn't tell me about. I realized her entire life had been built on lies. Lies she told herself, lies she told me, lies she told everyone around us. It made me question everything about our marriage, about the woman I thought I knew. But I also knew that I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to move forward, even if it meant rebuilding from the ashes. So I made a decision. No matter how bitter or unfair it felt, I was going to fight for my rights. I was going to see this through to the end. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's that some people only change when they're forced to face the consequences. Emily was one of those people, and I was done being her victim. I was ready to take back control of my life, even if it meant going through hell to do it. The court dates came faster than I expected, and I knew Emily was going to pull out all the stops to try and turn the tide in her favor. She was already playing the victim, crying in her lawyer's office about how I was ruining her life, how I was trying to destroy everything she's worked for. She even claimed I was abusive, which was a blatant lie. I had the evidence to prove her lies, and I made sure my lawyer was prepared for her manipulative tactics. Still, I could see the bitterness in her eyes, the way she refused to accept that her web of lies was unraveling. When we finally sat in front of the judge, Emily was at her most bitchy. She tried to paint herself as the wronged wife, insisting she was the victim of my controlling behavior. She claimed the affair with David was just a fling, that she never meant for it to ruin everything. She insisted she needed the money for her future, that inheriting $200, $0 was supposed to be her big break, but I knew better. I had all the proof, her texts, her secret bank accounts, the emails with the real estate agent. I knew she'd lied about everything from the start. The judge listened carefully and I laid out my case. How she'd lied about inheriting money, how she'd secretly sold our house, how she'd been unfaithful with David. I showed the court the evidence, and I could see the judge's expression shift from skepticism to disbelief. Emily's face was a mask of anger and frustration. She tried to argue, to spin her lies even more, but it was clear she was losing ground. The evidence was irrefutable. As the proceedings went on, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally getting some justice, even if it was hard-earned. I knew the fight wasn't over. She tried to appeal, tried to drag things out, but I also knew I had the upper hand now. The court ordered her to give me full access to the house and the savings account, and I was awarded a fair share of the sale of the house, which she tried to keep hidden from me. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental after months of lies, deceit, and betrayal. I'd fought for everything I deserved, and I'd won a crucial battle. But even with the legal win, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. I sat there in the courtroom, listening to her protests, and I felt nothing but cold anger. I'd trusted her once, believed in our marriage, and she'd thrown it all away for a quick thrill with David and some reckless spending. I wondered how I'd let it get this far, how I missed all the signs, how I was so blind to her manipulation. The betrayal cut deep, and I knew I'd carry that scar for a long time, but I also knew I had to move on. Even if it felt like I was starting over from scratch, I had to rebuild my life, without her, without the lies. After the court session, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. I was finally free from her grip, but the damage was done. I had to face the reality that the woman I loved had betrayed me in every possible way. I'd lost trust, stability, and the sense of security I once felt. Still, I reminded myself that I was stronger than I thought. I'd fought tooth and nail for my rights, and I'd come out the other side with some semblance of justice. Now, it was just a matter of healing and figuring out what the future holds. I knew there'd be a long road ahead, but I was determined to keep moving forward, because I refused to let her betrayal define me. That's a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. In the weeks that followed the court ruling, I started the long, painful process of picking up the pieces. The house was still ours, but it felt different, cold, empty, like the walls were echoing her absence. I had to move out of the bedroom, clear her things, and start reorganizing my life. It was brutal. Every corner reminded me of her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal. I'd catch myself thinking about her, then feeling angry all over again. But I knew I couldn't stay stuck in that place. I had to keep going, for my own sanity. One of the hardest parts was dealing with the aftermath of her trying to claim everything, even after the court's decision. Emily was bitter, furious that she'd lost control of the situation. She tried to appeal, dragged things out with more legal maneuvers, demanding more money, trying to guilt me into backing down. She even went as far as to threaten me with false accusations of abuse, just like she'd tried during the trial. I knew she was desperate, and I stayed calm, focused on my legal counsel, refusing to let her get under my skin. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. Meanwhile, she was still trying to spin her version of events to anyone who'd listen. Her friends, her family. She told all of them that I was the one who had cheated, that I was abusive, that I'd been controlling from the start. I heard from some mutual friends that she was playing the victim, claiming she was forced into a corner and that I was the real villain. But I didn't care about her lies anymore. I had the evidence and I knew the truth. I'd fought for my dignity, and I was determined to rebuild my reputation, even if it meant cutting ties with some people. The hardest part was seeing her face every time I had to interact with her during legal proceedings or exchanges of the kids. She'd throw nasty looks, sneer at me, and try to make me feel small. But I refused to give her that satisfaction. I stayed professional, cold, detached. I knew her game. She thrived on emotional chaos, and I wasn't going to let her win. I focused on maintaining a calm exterior, keeping my head high, and making sure the kids saw that I was still there, still fighting for them and for myself. As time went on, I started to realize something. The anger that had been consuming me was slowly turning into a form of acceptance. I accepted that Emily was a liar, cheat, and a manipulator. I accepted that I'd been betrayed in ways I never imagined, but I also accepted that I had survived it. I was still standing, still fighting. I was learning to trust myself again, piece by piece. I started seeing therapy as a necessity, talking through everything, dealing with the emotional scars and learning how to trust again. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I couldn't let her betrayal define me, but I also couldn't ignore the pain it caused. Most importantly, I learned how to set boundaries. No more secrets, no more lies, no more sneaking around. I made a vow to myself that I wouldn't let anyone manipulate or betray me like that again. I became more cautious, more aware of red flags, and more committed to honesty in my future relationships. I also started focusing more on my career, my kids, and my own well-being. I realized that I'd spent so much time trying to hold everything together that I'd forgotten to take care of myself. Now, I was slowly rebuilding that part of my life. Looking back, I see this whole ordeal as a brutal wake-up call. It hurt like hell, but it forced me to face my own strength and resilience. I learned that some betrayals cut so deep that you have to rebuild from scratch, but you can do it. You just have to be willing to face the pain, accept the truth, and take control of your life again. I don't hate Emily. I feel sorry for her, honestly. She's the one who lost her integrity, her dignity, and her marriage. And I'm determined not to let her destroy what little peace I have left. The road ahead is uncertain, but I know I'll be okay. Because I've learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to heal is to face the truth head on, and then move forward. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize just how much I've changed. The betrayal was a blow that nearly knocked me out, but somehow I managed to get back up. I've learned that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fully restore, but that doesn't mean I have to live in the past. The biggest lesson I've taken from all this is that I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. I survived her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal, more than once I thought I'd break, but I didn't. The hardest part was seeing how she tried to manipulate everyone around her, how she spun her lies to make herself look like the victim. I saw her attempt to turn the tables, to make me look like the bad guy, and I realized that some people will do anything to avoid taking responsibility. That's when I decided I wouldn't let her define my story anymore. I took control of my life, my emotions, and my future. I focused on my kids, my career, and my own healing. I started to rebuild trust in myself, learning to recognize red flags early and not ignoring the small signs that something was wrong. Looking back, I can see how naive I was, how I let her manipulate me into believing her lies, how I ignored the subtle signs because I wanted to hold on to the good times. But I also see the strength I developed in confronting her, in fighting for what was mine, and in refusing to be a victim. It's not easy, and I won't pretend it is. There are days I still feel angry, days I wonder how I could have missed it all, but those days are fewer now, replaced by a quiet confidence that I am better off without her. I've learned that sometimes love isn't enough to fix what's broken. Sometimes you have to walk away from someone who's betrayed you in every way possible, no matter how painful it is. And I've come to accept that I can't change her, only myself. I've found peace in knowing I did everything I could and that I fought for my dignity. That's what matters most. I don't hate her, I feel sorry for her, honestly. She lost her integrity, her respect, and her marriage because she chose lies and betrayal over honesty and commitment. So now I look to the future with cautious hope. I know I'll be okay. I've learned how to set boundaries, how to trust my instincts, and how to value myself again. I've come out of this battered but stronger, more aware of what I deserve. And that's the biggest lesson I want to share. No matter how dark things seem, there's always a way forward. You just have to be brave enough to face the truth, accept the pain, and then step into the light on. The other side. Because life doesn't stop and neither do I. I'm rebuilding, better, wiser, and more determined than ever.